Greetings to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and to you, Mr. Prakash Sisadri,
Thank you.
for this opportunity of a discussion with you on your soon-to-be released book titled The Spiritual CEO. I take it as a unique honor and a privilege to having a chat with you on the book, which is surely going to be a big deal in the realm of business management. All of us, to some extent, understand the concept of being spiritual in our respective ways of life. To me, for instance, being spiritual is looking beyond a larger canvas at humanity at large. It's not my view or your view, but a larger view which would be good for the organization, for the society, and for the world that we are living in. So that's my way of looking at spirituality, and I'm sure everybody has his own concept of spirituality. And as far as the CEO stands, for most of us who are in business or working with the government or otherwise, CEO is at the helms of the affair of a business entity, an institution, a nation, and the universe, the God Almighty, the CEO of all of us. So you see CEOs in different sizes and shapes, looking after the common goal of, until now, where the bottom line was the most important aspect. You know, how much you can generate revenue was the main objective as they were trained to be. I'm talking of the old school. But now, with all that we have gone through, and we have seen that the productivity, the prosperity is not always linked with what we earn, but how you get along with people, to your relationships, your concern, your compassion for people, your empathy, all put together makes you a perfect CEO. Now, your book, the title, The Spiritual CEO, sounds great to me. But it's also very intriguing. One would like to hold the book, read through it, and then realize as to what exactly is this concept, which is a great concept at the face of it. But spirituality and CEO, the two words which, as I mentioned, we understand to some extent what spirituality is and what CEO is, but the combination of being spiritual and being CEO, this new avatar that you have produced in your book, we would like to know what is this spiritual CEO as a concept, and we would like you to decode this for us. We may have our own interpretations, but we want you to decode this, bringing the two elements together and creating this beautiful book as we were sure it's going to be a great one. Before going further, just to give you a brief background of myself, I am Inderjit Singh, and I am an airport and aviation consultant with the International Civil Aviation Organization, headquartered in Montreal, and which is a specialized agency in the United Nations system of organizations. There are several organizations which get into the UN umbrella. So we are one of them. And our job primarily is we are the regulatory bodies for all the aviation activities around the world. So we want all the worlds who are signatory to our rules and regulations to follow them. And this is the only organization where all the countries of the world are signatories, because aviation is something that you can't have an aviation, Indian aviation, or a British aviation, or an American aviation. Aviation is something which is uniform across the board, and we have to be on the same page and understand the same language so that we can perform, because it's a high risk activity, as you very well know. And in the process of having served with International Civil Aviation Organization, I had the privilege to serve in several countries of Africa, South America, Asia, Middle East, on in diplomatic missions as a diplomat, ranging from 15 days to 2 years, because sometimes you are just called upon for a specific purpose. Like I was invited to Ethiopia only to comment on or review their projects from aviation security point of view. Prior to this, I was the CEO of Igi Airport New Delhi, which is the 16th busiest in the world, and it handles 75 million passengers per annum. It is ranked number one in the world in the 75 million category. We have different categories. So in the 75 million categories, Delhi Airport is number one, ranked number one from operational point of view, from aesthetics and administration, everything put together, it's number one. It's a very, very demanding job. And as you know, when I was the CEO of Delhi Airport, in those 3 years, I think I lived 30 years, because you have to give so much. And if if you understand the culture of Delhi, where people, before introducing their names, they say, "Do you know who I am?" So, when you're dealing with VIPs and VVIPs all the time, where in Delhi, everybody is a VIP or is linked to a VIP. So they generally introduce themselves as, you know who I am and you know whom you are speaking to, if you try to give your point of view to them. So it was a tough job, but with God's grace, everything went off very well and I was successful there. That's one spot where I understood what IQ is, what EQ is, and what SQ is, which is spiritual qualities of spiritual quotient. And a lot of people now refer to it as love quotient also. I don't know how far I'm correct, but I've heard this new terminology also. So I won't claim to be very good at EQ, but the work demanded that I understand the psyche of people. And to some extent, it helped me because I was born in a ship. Just to give a little background on how my personality or my being developed over the years. So I was born in a ship, which is no man's land. And as I grew, I understood that there is a certain purpose that I am here for. Because I always had this in my mind that I belong to the world. I don't belong to Africa I was born somewhere between UK and Africa. That's a different thing. But I never associated myself with one nationality. Wonderful. Or any religion for that matter. Beautiful. So you are an emotional guru, so you would understand that this kind of a psyche does help in your growth and your upbringing. So that got inculcated in my mind. So when I dealt with people, I didn't see them any different from me. Skin color never bothered me. Could be brown, black, white, or brown like me, but I thought these are immaterial. We have to see beyond, like you said in your kind of books, you go much beyond personal biases and, you're looking for something called freedom, freedom of thoughts, freedom of views, freedom of everything. Yeah. So having said all that, I would like to know from you for this book, very nice book to look at, and the contents, because I saw some very raving kind of observations by several people on this book. And the observations were so brilliant. I guess they must have read your script or your advance information that you gave them. Yeah. That we all are looking forward, especially the people who are in business. And they know that now is the time to realign our thinking, to rejuvenate ourselves, and have a totally different view of what we have been doing in the past. Principles remain the same, but we got to fine-tune them. So my first question to you, Mr. Seshadri, would be this interesting name that you got, the spiritual CEO. What's the motivation? Number two, I guess this is your 11th book.
Yes, sir.
and you have done some brilliant books in the past, the 10 books. So they were all basically on way of management, and you've been a mentor, you have been a guide, you have been a, you've been hand holding large institutions, realigning their businesses, trying to mentor their CEOs and all that. What made you write this book? I would say a total change in the genre. So if you could please tell us that to start with.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that beautiful introduction to the book, to yourself, and setting the context. And I'm very sure that coming from the aviation industry, you would love to get a 35,000 feet view. That people always say,
That's it.
Good.
Absolutely. That's I like your word, because we generally use it as a helicopter view, which flies
Helicopter.
around 7 to 8,000.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
fine, from 35,000, everything looks nice.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
Okay.
I remember that 30, 35 years ago when I started my career, and I used to read a lot of self-help books even during my college days. There have been significant people who have impacted the way in which I have helped these inputs to shape my life. Two, three works which carry a lot of importance, which shaped this specific book. One dates back to 1940s. This is a work by a person called Abraham Maslow. There is nobody wouldn't have heard about him at all. Abraham Maslow is one of the first motivational exponent. He found out what motivates people, how to make people to perform at higher levels. And he came out with the first set of theory called the Abraham Maslow's theory of needs. And he structured as part of a pyramid from the lowest, which is the fifth, to the topmost. He took each level. The first two were purely based on safety and food needs, which are also called as hygiene needs or survival needs. And once you're out of it, you move to the next one, which is love needs, being around with people whom you like and love. And then the fourth one, which builds on top, was called the self-esteem needs, where people want to be known for what they are. They want to make an impact in the society. They want to be spoken about in a positive way and things like that. And when he crossed that, he moved to the highest realm, which he found out. Of course, subsequently, a lot of changes have happened to the theory. He spoke about self-actualization. And in his experience or in his experiments, he found out that maybe 1 in 1 lakh, about if you the sample population actually look at self-actualization. And it's a if you do an internet search, you will find out that even a person like Einstein hardly used 5% of his capability during his lifetime. And with that, imagine what he could do. Had he used all his 100%, what could have been the result? But this being the case, if you really look at it, many of us, almost those who specifically work in the corporate life and who have material goals and ambitions, are stuck in the first two levels of the Abraham Maslow's theory of needs, which is all about survival. Survival at a low level, survival at a high level. Survival at a low level is just roti kapda makan, as they say, food, shelter, decent clothes to wear. Survival at a higher level is having a Benz or having a Ferrari. Yet it is survival need. And once you cross that and move is when people really find out what they need to contribute. I only laughed or smiled internally when you mentioned about your incidents at Delhi airport when people used to say, "Who am I? Do you know?" And there was this one person down south, a famous saint called Sri Ramana Maharishi, who asked that question as to who am I for almost 25, 30 years to find what his higher purpose was. I have interacted with hundreds and hundreds of CEOs and top level executives, many of them towards the fag end of their career. They realized that they were way too struck only on the monetary and financial aspects of the business. And many times they feel that, Prakash, it's too late. What can I do now? If I had a rewind button, I can go back and relive it properly all over again. This gave the first building block, which made me think, how do you push a person beyond just the survival needs and push them to the self-actualization need straight away when they work at the highest possible level? One of my gurus used to tell me that any human being who is born must learn to work at the highest level, not at the lowest level, because that's what the society needs of you. That's why God created and sent you down here first. But unfortunately, we are so busy chasing a tail of material living alone. Nothing wrong. After all, an organization, as Peter Drucker would say, is actually to do business and make money out of it, period. But is that all the only thing that matters? When I read the works of Daniel Goleman in 1980s, who is considered to be a guru on emotional intelligence, who really sort of, though I have never interacted with him in person, but the way he brought about the concept of emotional intelligence, though a lot of work had been done earlier, he codified them beautifully. And
Yes.
saying that people are all purely social beings with a lot of emotions and feelings. And if you're
Yes.
not smart enough to address that, it's no point in you calling yourself a great executive or a great CEO. He
Yes.
was the one who first killed the concept of IQ, saying that IQ and sheer brilliance in thinking is not sufficient. You must know how to feel what you are, and you must know how to feel others too. And my 30 years of exposure in spirituality brought about a dimension which had been waiting to be called out in some way or another, where all of
Okay.
us are capable impacting the universe in a much bigger and better way than what we are currently doing. We are all,
Mhm.
actually speaking, we are all exploiting the earth. I don't think we
Yes.
really are doing anything better. In
Not
whichever
really.
name we camouflage our interest, finally we are looting, exploiting, and all that. No harm, because when you're not aware, you can't be blamed for what you're not aware of. And then there is always a call that comes from several quarters which awakens people. The spiritual CEO is to give rise to that awakening in a CEO. Why did I choose a CEO? Why not a common man? Why not an executive? Why not anyone else in this world? Then I looked at the concept of what is called as the influencers. You can either
Yes.
talk to 1,000 people individually and hope to change them, or speak to one person who can influence all 1,000. For example, I reach out to a large actor, a big politician, who takes this as a momentum and talks to people that this is what has to be done. People will accept, because we all
Yes.
still have this mentality of following, the sheep mentality, as it's called, the herd mentality. And hence I chose the CEO because these are the people who actually make all the major decisions in an organization, and they influence. The values or the lack of values is determined by this single person. And when we are able to change and help him transform and metamorphosize, surprisingly, in some of the organizations have implemented the concepts what I have talked in the book, I have found that the financial impact has actually become better. But people were living by better values. They were able to peacefully coexist. You beautifully said that each one has his own definition of spirituality. What I have touched upon in this book is my fundamental belief system that spirituality is something which makes you peaceful, happy, and allows you to express your higher form, whatever it may be. It is not something stuck to religion. It's not something stuck to one specific cult or a sect or a belief system. And all
Yes.
this helped me to bring about the concept of karma, alchemy, and corporate DNA into one single book. Of course, it's based on partly on Mahabharata mythology and a lot of movies from English, Hollywood, and all that. Finally, the concept is a spiritual CEO is a person who can balance both his material life and still keep all his values alive and kicking, wherein he allows people in himself outside to express and come to the best and leave the world a better place than what we found when we actually walked in here. I hope I answered your questions.
Absolutely fine. Yes, and you touched upon two very nice words, like you said, metamorphosis. I mean, I always like this word, and it's really transformation and never say die attitude.
Yeah,
And I always take example of the caterpillar when the
exactly.
caterpillar thinks that it's all over and then it turns into a butterfly.
Yeah, yeah,
So as I mentioned to you at Delhi airport, we really had a tough time, but I loved every moment of it. We had a major kind of a disaster, 747 on fire, and we all worked towards it and managed to save 300 lives. And
wonderful.
lives plus the collateral damage.
Yeah,
You know, a 747 landing at Delhi airport where you always have about 40 to 50 aircraft parked all the time.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, a lot of them would have just gone away should that crash happen. And when you mention about leaders, like there is no limit to their, like you said, some people at the stage when they think that now it's, over, we are going to retire. I think professionals should never even think of
exactly.
retirement. I always felt that the last rung of your ladder is perhaps a stepping stone for the next ladder beyond.
Beautiful.
You may not climb that ladder, but your second and the third in line
Yeah,
could possibly start climbing that ladder once you go away. So, because generally the feeling is that once you reach at the pinnacle, if you take the top of the ladder as the pinnacle, then there is no way to go but to come down.
exactly.
I feel, that's my personal conviction, that if you take that end of the ladder as beginning of another ladder, start on till your journey takes you. At some stage, you say, okay, now I go, you take over, and a succession plan, as
Like a
you know.
baton exchange.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so what you mentioned is it's very timely said in today's context, because uh, universe has actually shaken us to awaken us. Sometimes I feel
Exactly.
that, I won't say universe has created this COVID and all, but
We have created.
we have created, and we are part of the universe. To
Yeah,
quite an extent, we are there to be blamed for it collectively, all of us put together.
very well said.
And yes, and it perhaps the reason is that the kind of barriers that we have created around us. I mean, we don't understand each other's language. We don't understand what other person's ambitions are, and especially when you reach at the top, you one takes it as granted that here I am to command. But correct me if I'm wrong, your command would only be taken by your juniors if they think that the command is worthy of a command.
Exactly.
I realized that when I was talking to you about that incident, in that I won't call a panic situation, because we are all used to handling such situations. So if we don't even declare them panic, it's one of the many things that happen at an airport. But when I gave a command, there was no discussion, there was no debate, there was no argument. And after doing the postmortem, we realized that my little command was agreeable to them because they
Correct.
had faith in me. If they had doubts about my command, probably we would be arguing and the fire would have taken place.
Exactly.
Right. So, what do you expect? Because you mentioned metamorphosis, you feel that this kind of a book, the new book that you have, the Spiritual CEO, would bring a sea change in people's attitude, and how would you like them to look at it so that they can make the best of it? You have done a great job by giving them a recipe to become better or transform themselves. What's your advice when I'm the CEO and I'm too many things happening in my world? Then you give me this book. What would be your advice to me as to go through it, understand it well?
Wonderful question, sir. You're actually rekindling my memory in one of the lectures I was giving to a B school. I told them that after Alexander, the world is still living. After
Yes,
Christ, the world is living. After Mahatma Gandhi, the world is still there. After
yes,
you're gone, dusted, the world will still be there. The world
absolutely.
does not revolve around us at all. In fact, we are just a
Yes,
blip in the 10 billion years the Earth has been there, which is a 15 billion old universe.
yes,
Human beings have been there for about 300,000 years and has advanced civilization for about 3 to 4,000 years. And
yes,
we still think that we are God sent. Maybe we are God sent, but
yes,
with a better purpose than just ruling over people, commanding, abusing, shouting. I think that wake up call, many CEOs whom I come across are very matured, except that they don't have inputs and insights. See, the challenge I have found, which this book helps to sort of bridge a gap which has been existing. If you look at, there are two kind of advisors that a CEO taps into. One, they tap into management experts who can help strategize, expand market, product, services, make money and all that. On the other side, in the evenings or in the weekend, they go to a spiritual guru. And what
yes,
happens is both are completely diametrically opposite. One person is speaking about money and market and success and EPS, earnings per share and things like that. And in the evening, you change your dress and go with a, you know, a different colored dress to a place. And then the Swamiji is giving a completely different lecture. There is no, we are not able to, it's like kerosene and water. They don't seem to mix. Whereas actually speaking, both these are part of our DNA. as you beautifully said in the beginning, love quotient, which is replacing emotional quotient and spiritual quotient. It's all finally about I, as a human being, wanted to be liked, loved, be compassionate, people being merciful. And this
Yeah.
is something, thanks to the pandemic, it's a wake up call. In fact, just in the beginning of the pandemic is when my thought came up that this is the time to write the book. Though I had been contemplating on this topic for almost 3, 4 years, I said there's a
Okay.
time people will listen to it because they have been shaken. And when
Yes.
I started writing, when I actually the book was supposed to come out 2, 3 months back, I felt people have overcome it because the pandemic was over. But the Spanish flu taught us that the second wave was around, and this time when the book is actually coming, many people
Yes.
are intrigued, as you said. I have brought a bridge between two sides of a coin, which all along didn't seem to exist. Spirituality on one side. This was something done by Lord Krishna in Mahabharata in his Gita lectures. If you really go deeper, you will find
Yes.
that it has wisdom of being a king and wisdom of bringing spiritual realms into the day-to-day life. I'm not asking
Yes.
people to run away from life, asking people to face life, but with love and compassion, with certain values, with certain
Yes.
unified factor to help build a trust and respect, to be an integral factor instead of a divisive factor. Be
Yes.
happy when you hit the grave, finally, that hyphen which is between the date of birth and date of death, is that what is going to define you in your life? Or are you going to give a larger legacy and a footprint in life? And this is something, see, books by itself cannot change people, but it can
No.
kindle their thinking. Because books
Yes.
are read in private places. When I'm sitting in home, nobody is giving me a lecture. I'm reading the book on my own interest. Whereas when
Yes.
I'm sitting and forcing a talk on someone, sometimes they don't like it because it looks like advice. Whereas when they read a book, though they are caught unaware, they know they can reflect. They look at a mirror and say that what I see on the mirror is an ugly face. What do I do about it? And
Yes.
this, I think, is what the book is supposed to do: make them think, make them feel, hopefully
Yes.
bring a change. There have been a lot of work which have come before, a lot of works will come, but this one work, in my view, is a very important piece of amalgamation between management and spirituality. In my view, I've done research on the net for last 20, 30 years. Not one single book has come in this genre where it is a bridge between management and spiritual value to make a
Yes.
person successful and also be balanced.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, no, it's and one line which you mentioned about spirituality and business, or is they are two sides of the same coin. They are inseparable two sides of the same
Exactly.
coin. I mean, if this thing gets into their mind, that don't look as two entities. They're just inseparable
Yeah,
sides of
yeah.
the same coin. And I think that would make a lot of difference amongst the all the chapters. You, I think there are 9 chapters, if I'm not
Yes, sir.
mistaken.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So 9 chapters. Is there any reason for having them in 9 chapters, or it's just like you thought now is the end of the book? Let's stop it. Or do
Uh,
you intend expanding this book in a second volume or something?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. The reason behind 9 chapters is the 9 avatars which have already happened of Lord Vishnu.
Oh,
And the
okay.
10th is yet to come. The Kalki avatar is yet to come. The 9 has come. And each, if you look at each, is a transformation to a next level. Initially, he came as a fish. Then he came as a tortoise. Then he came. Whether we believe it or not, there are mythologies and stories available.
Yes,
Whether I'm
yes.
a
It's a
God
matter
believing,
of faith.
yeah, it's a matter
Yeah.
of faith. Whether you're
Yeah.
atheist, so I'll read it as a story. And the
Yeah.
Purna avatar, which is Lord Krishna, is when he has metamorphosized into the best of his avatar. And he
Okay.
says that something more is yet to come, which is the 10th avatar,
Okay.
which is supposed to come much later, whenever it happens. And this
Okay.
is what made me to say that, okay, the 9th chapter, when you finish, which of course I am also designing as a course for global CEOs, where people actually can go through, and at the end of the 9th chapter, they actually feel the metamorphosis of having become a complete avatar of what they are capable of. And of
Okay.
course, to answer your second question, sequel is already signed up, and I've already finished the framework for it, but it's still under wraps. I may not be
Okay.
able to talk about it right now. But
No.
in the next few months, yes, the initial framework is already done. The framework manuscript is done, because once I finished the book way back in August, September last year,
Yes.
what you see here, it went through multiple edits with the publisher, Westland, who is owned by Amazon in India.
Oh, it's
So typically Amazon publishes others' book. Here it's a book which is owned and published by Amazon themselves. And they already signed me up for the next book, and it's shaping up. It will be a sequel to the book that you see. And it will have more curveballs and dimensions which I have not touched in this book, sir.
Excellent. I think it's a wonderful job done, and can't wait for the time when we can hold. And I mean, Kindle and all is one thing, but to hold a book in your hand and read, that's always so rewarding an experience.
Exactly.
And with your, I'm really honored to have spoken to you today, and wish you a lot of luck, not only in this book, but in your upcoming next book, a sequel to this, with the same name, or you're going to change that?
It will be changed a bit. It'll be slightly
give us another surprising kind. I mean, this if I was to go to a bookshop having not heard about it, and I had a spread of books lying in front of me, automatically I'll be drawn to it. And because the name is so intriguing and one wants to know as to what it is. And then once we know that it's from somebody as accomplished as you, as an author, the temptation becomes much more. I'm so happy that you pointed out Daniel Goleman. I mean, like it was when I was doing my management, it was like a Bible to us.
Exactly.
And it was so meaningful. And I still remember a book called Working with Emotional Intelligence.
Exactly, 1989.
Yes, which helped me a lot when I landed up at the airport. Like there was one president who used to, when he was confronted with some big problem, he would pull out his wallet, take out the bill, look at Lincoln's picture and say, oh, what would Lincoln do if he was in this situation?
Yeah.
So many a times we used to refer to, what would Daniel Goleman do if he's confronted with this problem? Because, that's the kind of right mind we thought he has.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that you had a personal discussion with him or something like you have known him.
I have not personally known him, but I connected with him through LinkedIn and things like that. Yes.
Okay, fine. No, he's another great mind in emotional intelligence. So I'm looking forward to getting that book. And when do you intend releasing it so that others also get to know?
The book will be launched on the 30th of April, just a few days from now. The pre-booking has already started, which is there in the standard discounted price, which is part of the marketing strategy of any publisher. And post this, of course, it will be a much bigger launch that they will be doing. Because of the pandemic, I'm not able to visit the stores and do in-store launches. Yes, so if the launches, all launches...
Read out a few chapters and explain to people, as is the practice. In the past, I'm sure you have done that.
Yeah, but now we are looking at shifting all that virtually. Like many of the bookstores will do a virtual book launch where I'll read a chapter. And book readers might log in through a virtual video platform, talk to me. The publisher is looking at all the options post 30th. So let's see how it shapes. But it was wonderful talking to you, sir. I'm really honored because I've heard a lot about you, and in person to talk with you on this book, it really gives me, it really makes me feel very good, sir.
I'm honored.
I'm honored too. I thank a lot, and I hope that you will get the book soon on your hand. I'll arrange for that, and we'll meet someday in person. Thanks a lot, sir.
Sure, for sure we'll meet. Thank you very much.